We're here today to speak with one of our contributors to our new book, How to Heal Our Divides. Jeff Burns is a peace and human rights activist. He's been active in building bridges of reconciliation, peacemaking, and friendship between Muslims and Christians in the U.S. and overseas for the last 10 years. Jeff served as the East Coast Regional Director for Peace Catalyst International for 4 years. From 2005 to 2009, Jeff was regularly featured writer for the Muslim newspaper IQRAA. He's been invited to speak in many mosques and was a guest speaker at the Muslim American Society annual convention in 2009. Before his calling as a peacemaker, Jeff served as a senior pastor for 18 years. He went on to become part of the house church movement and served as elder and in the Sojourners Simple Church Network. When he left the pastorate in 2004, he went on to become a certified life relationship coach. Currently, he's working on advanced coaching certifications in leadership and success coaching with Jack Canfield and John Maxwell. Jeff's got an MDiv from Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary and a DMin that focused on Christian-Muslim relationships from Regent University. So, Jeff, it's wonderful to have you as part of this program.
It's a pleasure to be here today, Brian, and I'm honored to have this time with you.
Well, congratulations on all you've achieved and all the focus that you've applied to this, important problem.
Thank you.
Maybe you can just start by telling us how you got involved in the first place in Muslim Christian relationships.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Before I tell you how, let me give you a little bit of the why, the problem that led to that. My background was evangelical, charismatic. I was Southern Baptist and I was a charismatic pastor. Attended Liberty University, a lot of wonderful people there. But one of the 5 kind of cardinal principles at Liberty was unilateral support for Israel. And so we were taught kind of the new golden rule for fundamentalism at that time was, if you don't support Israel, God will curse us. So I could not reconcile loving Muslims with loving Jews. I mean, because I saw Muslims as a threat to Israel, and that's all I could see. So I became the term they use was a Christian Zionist. The Christian Zionist means we support Israel no matter what they do. If they want to drive everybody off the West Bank, it's God's land. I mean, it's their land. But what you don't realize is the West Bank and Gaza aren't the only parts. It's also goes all the way to the Euphrates. That means there's going to be a lot of people displaced for that dream to happen. Well, so what I did was, out of that kind of principle, I call it the new golden rule of fundamentalism among Christians, was that I couldn't see that Muslims were also descendants of Abraham. We took that verse very with a specific context. So that affected my view of Muslims. I saw Muslims as a mistake. That Ishmael was a mistake, which I now renounce all that. And I've asked Muslims to forgive me. And as I look at the scriptures closely, I realize that that's not true. And so I felt this thing that just this real negative mindset towards Muslims. And so I just couldn't reconcile it. And if I tried to even question it, people would come down pretty hard on that. So God knew it was going to take an encounter to reach me. He knew he was going to have to, I believe, this is my belief, that a child would be the one that would conquer my heart. So I love children so much. We tried for 20 years to have children. We couldn't. So then we adopted, which we have a wonderful daughter. And we put all of our money in the ministry into children and youth when I was a pastor. I actually would run the youth programs too. And so I pastored 18 years. We had people want to put up Israeli flags in the church. I said, well, I'm willing to do that if we put a flag of all the nations. To me, that felt a little strange. And so after 18 years, I left the pastorate. I was a little disillusioned. I'm writing a book about this called Barely Christian. I'm going to explain one of the books I'm writing, and just that journey, that struggle. So I resigned, and in 2004, And after, so then 9/11 hit. When 9/11 hit, that sealed the deal for me. But man, these are bad people. They're intrinsically evil. Even if they're your next door neighbor and they're nice, if they're not terrorists, they have terrorist leanings, and they would, just put us all under Sharia law tomorrow if they could. And I didn't even understand what that meant. That's just what was coming out. So in 2004, I resigned the pastorate, and I was like, what am I going to do with my life now? And I started getting trained, certified as a life coach. I've been doing that and leadership coaching for the last 15 years, like you said. But one day I received an email in 2004, and it said, this is how I got in. And it was really kind of I call it my Saul on the road to Damascus experience, or my Jonah in the belly of the whale. I did not go looking. Jonah ran from preaching to Nineveh, and Paul was persecuting. And I was invited to take this 3-month class on the Muslim, on Islam. And the church was sponsoring it in Cary, North Carolina. And they said, Jeff, we would love for you to be participate in this class. We hope to have about 70 people. You've been a very influential pastor here, but we need you to support us. And I'm just going to be frank with you. And I laughed when I got those. They kept at me. I laughed and I said, it will be a cold day in hell before I go spend 3 months studying Islam. Yeah, I know all I need to know. I saw them as a monolithic religious thing, and I had it all figured out. That's what ignorance does to you. And they kept at me. My wife said, Jeff, you fought the racial battle in the South so people of color could attend the Baptist churches you were in. And it was rough. I found out one of my leadership boards, half of them had been in the Ku Klux Klan, and they fought me so hard on. I had actually had a breakdown in this battle at one point. It was just so intense. So you fought hard for that. But when it comes to Muslims, you're a racist in your heart. Oh, I was so mad.
Wow.
I was so angry.
When your wife tells you something like that,
yeah,
pretty serious.
You've done all this other stuff. You've been progressive, but when it comes to this, you got an issue. So I was furious, and I was mad. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll take that class when Jesus Christ himself appears at the foot of my bed and asks me to take the class, but I want to see his ID for confirmation. And so I've been a smart butt. Well, she kept praying. I found that other people were praying I would take the class. And finally, I didn't want to appear anti-progressive. That's the only reason I took it. So I took it. It lasted 90 days. They brought imams in. They brought in Christian leaders, and we had to read all these books and chat room stuff. None of it I wanted to do. It was a lot like getting a colonoscopy. It was just, I did it because it was necessary, but I didn't want to do it. And so, but as time went on, I began to realize, I remember one day we had 70 people in class. We had a big snack table in the back. If I got a little bored, I'd just go back to the snack table. And I had to realize by this time that Islam is not a monolithic religion. It is as diverse as Christianity, really. You got Sunni, Shia, and in those groups, you have your charismatics called Sufis. But then you have schools of thought. There's a whole lot. It's not monolithic. And you have liberals and conservatives, you have fundamentalists, and it's everything. So I said, okay, I've learned a lot, no harm done, but this is as far as it goes. I still don't like them, but I'm not going to attack them anymore. I realized that, I've been wrong about a lot of things. Well, they said, in order to get credit for this class, you have to go make friends. The coordinator spoke up with a Muslim, and you have to go attend one of their dawah presentations or outreach presentations where you go sit for a couple of hours and they do answer questions and teach about Islam. Brian, I wanted to die. I was so frustrated. My stomach tensed up, and I said, oh, no, I wouldn't have done this if I knew I was going to have to do this, even if Jesus appeared at the foot of my bed. I'd rather have a colonoscopy than do this. And I was like, oh, God. But coming from a Southern Baptist background, traditional background, I wanted to get my certificate. Because Southern Baptists it's not that way today, but back then, if you mowed the grass, the church gave you a certificate. It was just the way, all those discipleship programs they had, so I put the time in. I want proof that I was here. And you could even get seminary credit for it. So I'll never forget the day. I struggled. I couldn't sleep at night. I was really, my stomach was in knots. And I'm like, God, what are you doing? Why am I so upset about this? So I was sitting in a Starbucks on Creedmoor Road back in 2005 in the winter. And I had my notebook laid out and my highlighters. And I was reading. And I looked at the men wearing the skull caps in the pictures, and I looked at the beards, and I looked at the women with the hijabs, and I'm like, Lord, this is way out of my comfort zone. I said, surely you're not calling me to build bridges of love and peace between Muslims and Christians, and to become a pioneer with friendship with the House of Ishmael. I said, surely you're not. You got the wrong guy. I'm Southern. You know what I mean? This is way outside. I said, it took me forever to learn how to say salam alaikum, which means peace be to you in Arabic. And I tell them I had an accent. I said, well, I learned it from a man. I learned Arabic from a man in Southern Saudi Arabia. I make jokes like that. So I'm sitting there, and finally I just bow my head, I was holding on to my cappuccino, making sure nobody was watching. And I said a prayer like this. I said, okay, God, here's the deal. If you're calling me to be a bridge builder between Muslims and Christians, this seems so outside my comfort zone. You're going to give me a sign so clear, I will never, ever doubt it. Then I felt this peace. It wasn't the peace of God. You see, we Baptists don't believe in signs much. And so I wasn't expecting God. I thought, I'm checkmate. I just checkmated God. I'm off the hook. Well, then, I'm great. I just checkmated God. And then I'm being smug, and I'm writing, working. And next thing I know, this little boy standing next to my table. And he says, sir, I would like to borrow one of your magic markers. And kids were always coming up for my highlighters, the Starbucks. I was in there so much. I had to let them play with ones I wasn't using. I said, sure, take the blue one. He says, no, sir, I prefer the orange one. Now, remember, I had just prayed for a sign, right? And so I said, sure, I'll take that. And he stood there and looked at me and just kept looking. And finally, he got in, how the little Starbucks tables, they're round, how they're just kind of round. And so he pulled a chair around. I thought, what's this little guy doing? He pulled the chair around. He was so little, he got up in the chair on his knees and put his elbows on the table, and he had this orange highlighter like this, and he pops the lid off and says, sir, but remember I prayed for a sign. By the way, my name is Omar, and I am 5 years old, and I'm here to teach you some Arabic. Oh my God. And I was like, then he gets out a piece of paper, starts writing out the Arabic, saying it real loud. And my knees got weak. I look over at him. He has a little Islamic elementary school uniform on. So that's another sign. So I'm sitting there. My knees were, I thought I was going to pass out. And it was almost as if the Holy Spirit whispered in my ear, you didn't think I could do that, did you? Man. So before I could get my thoughts together, this woman starts yelling, Omar, what are you doing? Leave that poor man alone. And I said, no, ma'am, Omar can do whatever he wants to do. Because after that, I'm like, okay, I got my sign. If I reject it, what's it going to be? Locust plague, whatever. I didn't know what was going to happen. So Omar, 5 years old, God knew he'd conquer me through a child. He wrote out the Arabic alphabet, and he said, obviously he was learning it in school. And he said, now you write it out. So I looked at he wasn't a calligrapher, okay? So I looked at it, and I thought I wrote it just like he did. And he said, it's all wrong. I said, it's just like yours. No, it's all wrong. And he goes, I'm going to have to come around this table and take your hand and guide you through the Arabic alphabet.
Oh, my goodness. So
he said, say it with me. And I was a Hebrew student. I studied 2 years of Hebrew. And I said, this language sounds a lot like Hebrew. It's nothing like Hebrew. He said, it's the language of heaven. So he took my hand. And by the time we got to the end of that Arabic alphabet, I call it like my Jonah or Saul experience. All the hate was gone for Muslims. It was literally all the prejudice. It was gone. I got my sign. And so I went over to his mother afterwards, and I said, Omar is going to be a great teacher one day. And she said, well, we're very surprised by this. And I said, why? Omar is an extremely shy child. He would never go up to a stranger or a non-family member and do this. And we've been sitting here trying to figure out what made Omar get up and go to you. Well, I knew, but I wasn't ready to talk about it. Wow. So that day I walked out the door. Literally, it's dark. I remember looking up at the stars. I said, God, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do it. I have no role models. I have no mentors. But from this day forth, I'm going to be a peacemaker, between Muslims and Christians. And now that's expanding too. And that was the beginning. That's how I got in.
That is just so unreal. I mean, what an amazing experience. And I know you share a short version of that in in the book, but oh my goodness, thank you for telling that story. It's just
No, it's my pleasure. Yeah, it changed my life. And that was my guiding star. And whenever I would go through something hard, I'd say, God, you spoke. And my heart's never stopped loving them, you know. And he gave me a special grace, you know, in this that I'll call it like a second conversion. Really, it really was for me. From Islamophobe to loving Muslims in a moment. I've been struggling with it, but in a moment like that, in my opinion, it was supernatural. You know?
wow. So through all of your work, you developed this peace path model.
Yes.
So how did that come about?
Well, that's a very good question. You know, I started out, I didn't know what to do, Brian. I just knew I was supposed to do something. And my nature is I'm an action-based person. So my wife, I shared this stuff with her, and of course she was on board right away. So, you know, I tried to get you to see this, but she was amazed. But I started telling people the story. I started telling some of my friends, this is what happened. And so I decided, well, it's time to go make friends with a Muslim. So we went down to the mosque for the Dawah presentation. That's the outreach. It was kind of like a graduation exercise. So the whole class went, and there was this physicist student from Africa, Ghana. And he was teaching, and Brian, I felt like, you got to remember, I have charismatic roots in me too. So I really felt like God impressed my heart and said, I want you to go up to him and tell him you want to become friends. I said, after Omar, I'll do anything. So you know what I mean? So I went up to him and said, I think God wants us to become friends. He goes, let's do it. So he was my first Muslim friend. And we began he was eating in our brilliant, now he's a brilliant physicist, eating in my home. I would go to his house and eat. And we began to talk about the kingdom of God and the straight path, how they're very similar. We started talking about Jesus in the Quran, in the Bible. I said, look what the commonalities are that we have here. And he was astounded by that. And so we spent hours, and then we got close enough after eating together, we could ask the hard questions. I said, okay, you need to help me here, my friend. I'll just call him Ahmed. You need to help me here. Explain this whole jihad thing to me. This is when, you know, Al-Qaeda was at its peak, and I said, I don't understand. Then he just explained to me, this is not what we're about. You know, that the real jihad is the struggle of the internal, you know, spirit, living out your character and living as a person of God and a good person on the earth. And we talked, and then he'd ask me questions. You guys worship three gods? And I said, no, we don't worship three gods. And I explained that. And so we began to develop this understanding. So I would go down to the mosque every Friday, the largest mosque in Raleigh. I got so many friends there. They were so kind to me. They put up with me, and I would go in, and they were so big. I guess if all the prayer services about 5,000 by the time it's done, then a huge youth program. I would go in and sit through the three services and sit in the back, and then I would stay for lunch. They had a big cafeteria, and I would eat with the imam or some of the leaders. And I felt like I was repenting, Brian. I felt like I've had such prejudice so long. I need to be quiet for a year and hear their story. I needed to hear the Palestinian story. I needed to hear the other story, the other side of nations that have unfortunately been, you know, destroyed by our own government militarily. I had to sit and hear about what happened to their families when bombs were dropped, and why they all believed that evangelical Christians hated them. They were convinced of that. So here I'm coming in. I don't know if you consider me progressive or post or not. I don't know. I still love and respect my roots. But we would sit and I listened. I made it a commitment to listen. And from that shaped my thinking. I began to realize, wow, you know, Stephen Covey says, seek first to understand before you're understood. And then he has a thing called the third alternative, where I look at myself and say, I see you over there. I'm going to look at you not through my lens, my tribal lens, or my prejudice or this. I'm going to choose to reach out to you, and you reach back, and we're going to get to know each other. And we're going to create a third alternative that transcends the other two, you know, being separate. And so I started doing that for you. And so finally, people started asking me to come in and how do we build bridges? Well, I didn't even have a real organized curriculum. I taught them how to host Muslims in your home. If you want to ask a Muslim over, you can't have wine and pork, and don't have your dog running around. They like cats, but dogs are not seen as a clean animal. And I said, and you got to have halal food. So I had to teach them, well, halal, you can either offer kosher food or halal food. And halal basically means it was killed by an Islamic butcher in the Islamic way. Very similar to kosher. There used to be a saying, it's kind of a proverb, I think I can't remember if it's an Arab proverb or not, but it kind of tells you how a lot of Muslims have felt. They say, when you're on a journey, eat at the house of the Jews, but sleep at the house of the Christians. So because you can eat with the Jews, but we don't, they didn't trust them, so stay with the Christians. I mean, it's kind of, and so I began to realize once I trained them on how to have host with halal food in their homes, like fish, and I get all my meats from the Muslim butcher, no problem. Everybody came. They were relieved, because in the past they'd say, well, you just come over. I said, no, I'm serving halal food, halal, we're doing that. So I was doing all this stuff, but I didn't, how do you say this? When you're a practitioner, you're doing things and you're teaching it to others, but you don't have a systematic kind of way. Do you know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah.
It's working, and you don't know why. You don't know why it's working. So one of my proteges, Dr. Mikal Mullenberg, I introduced you to her.
Yes.
I was mentoring her on this, and she took these practices and took them to another level. And she said, Jeff, you really need to come up with a way to communicate this to others. So she created, and it helped me create an acronym, Peace Path. And from that, we developed the model. That's how it came about. Simple. So I got a 60-page, and I got a whole book, 220 pages on this. I just need to edit it and try to get it published. It's an expansion of that book. And that's how it began. So finally, oh, wow, I got a structure now. Because, a lot of times pioneers are not, what do you call it? You need people who are structured to come and say, this is what you're doing and it's work. Now let's put this together for others. So that's how it came about. Yeah.
Wow. And there are 5 practices. Right?
Yes.
Within that structure.
Yeah.
You just touch on each one of those briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're all built, and I'll make this very clear to people. The practices are the arms, legs, hands, and feet of the core message. And the core message, I go to Muslims say, Jesus said you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself, treat other people the way you want to be treated, and if you find enemies along the way, do everything within your power to make them your friends. That's it. I say, I'm not into volumes and volumes of reflection about the apocalypse and what happens after we die. I think we have our hands full with the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus said, all the law and the prophets hang on this. Jesus said, most important stuff is this right here. So I said, we can walk together as Christians. So in our group that we formed, we had diversity. I said, our vision is to love Muslims and be peacemakers. And so we laid aside a lot of, you had Pentecostals and Presbyterians, you see what I mean? And so the 5 practices, and that's what Mikal was very like, it's something, what do you do? One of the number one things I noticed I did was, first practice, and I trained others, is you want to find out where God's working. See, I always look at the dream, the kingdom. I don't say kingdom of God much anymore, because in our language today, most people don't know what that means. So I say things like God's dream for the world. You start saying that's the kingdom of God. So what's God's dream for? You can ask it to an atheist. I did one time. An atheist said, I said, what do you think God's dream for the world is? He goes, I don't believe in God. Well, if you did, what do you think his dream would be? He says the same thing that the church says: in poverty, bring people together, in conflict, feed the hungry, do all those things. So the first step I would go to mosques and leaders. I've met with muftis who are like over nations. And I say, sometimes I take Christians with me who want to build relationships. And I would say, can you tell me, and these Christians right here who live near you, how they can be a blessing to you and your people? That's the question. Because the answer to that question identifies where God's working, where his dream is. Okay. And his dream is, all around us. So I remember the Grand Mufti of Kosovo said to me, he had tears, and he said, I've got to pause a minute. I don't know what to say. I never had a Christian ask me this question before. So I said, how can we be blessing you and your people? Some said, we need to have more dialogue. Some said we need to go beyond dialogue and become friends. Some said we need our mosque painted. They had people in the mosque, but we need help. Some said one was we are, I was on the Muslim Yahoo group in Raleigh, and it was 500 Muslims. I was the only non-Muslim. And they would say, hey, Eid is coming, and we're all Muslims going to be meeting at the fairgrounds. That's going to be about 20,000 people. We don't have enough people to lay prayer lines. So God showed me where he was working. I was right there, and I said, hey, we can help you if you don't mind working with some Christians. And I said, I can provide 28, 30 Christians. And they said, we'll take it. So we went down there till 2 in the morning, laid tape. I couldn't hardly walk from squatting, and laying the tape we did it, no hook to love. It got in the media. I'll never forget that night. The Muslims said, Jeff, they called us together, and they said, these men crossed a great religious line to help us. The Muslims did. And they gave us coffee and donuts 2 in the morning. They put their hand on their heart and said, we want you to know we pledge our hearts to you this day, that wherever you are, whatever you do, however you need us, we'll be there. If you need us at your church, we'll be there. I mean, it broke a barrier down. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how can we be a blessing? I did this over and over again. And I realized we don't need to tell people what we can do. We need to find out what they need. They'll tell you the secrets of their heart. So that's all we did, what they need. They need this, that, we get it. I had one imam say, I'm having trouble with my young men getting in gangs. And I said, well, I can help you. Even if I didn't know how to do it, I knew I'm going to figure it out. I hooked them up with a youth pastor, and they became best friends with the imam's son. And they started doing things. But anyway, so that was the first practice. How can we be a blessing to you and your people? And mean it. And mean it, And then the second one was become friends, authentic friends. And I tell people, listen, there's Muslims and Christians that become friends with the other for the sole purpose of conversion. And if you go in with that mindset, it's all going to go away. Now, I'm not saying don't share your faith. I can talk about Jesus wherever I go. I go to mosques, but I tell my story. I've never had any pushback on that. And we begin to find out that a lot of Muslims say, well, we love Jesus too. He's one of our favorite prophets. So we begin, that doesn't have to be polemic. So I said, become good friends without a hook. The agenda is friendship and understanding. And so we started building friendships. And then that's where I just started doing training on how to do that. Second one was once you become good friends, eat together in each other's homes, reciprocate it. You know what I mean? Meet their friends. And I said, we're not really friends until we're eating in each other's homes and our children are playing together. I said, that's the test. Because unfortunately, I've been a part of a lot of dialogue. It's great. And most conservatives, Christians don't come to the dialogue table, which is unfortunate. And but what I have found is there's a lot of resolutions signed. There's a lot of things done. But this level, I've had even people tell me in dialogue movements, we've never got to that level you have gotten to doing this. Now, so I'm not saying they all haven't, but we were in. And so eat together. And then the third one practice was explore faith together. And what I mean by that is don't say, aha, now's my chance to evangelize. Nope. Explore faith together. And what that meant was now that you're friends, and I even to train Christians on how to do that so they wouldn't be offensive. And I tell Muslims, listen, when you're talking to Christians, maybe not the first thing you do is accuse them of worshiping three gods. Ask them to explain what they mean when they say Trinity, what they mean, let's teach them how to be civilized. Really, is all I do. And so they did that as friends. And man, it changed things on how people understood each other's faith. And then the fourth one was do a service project in the community together. And so we had some work built Habitat homes. A bunch of us built Habitat homes with the Jewish community and the Muslim community, community gardens. I could just go on and on. The Ronald McDonald House, others. And they knew, and it just changed. It broke down barriers in a powerful way. So and we just kept repeating that over and over. That's all I do. Really, somebody said you're like a hillbilly with a PhD, so I like to keep things simple. And so I said, it's just a simple thing. It just needs some training, to walk out those steps. Yeah.
Wow. So in your chapter of our book, How to Heal Our Divides, you mentioned a 66-page ebook.
Yes.
That kind of explains the model. So
yes,
we'll have a link to that.
Great.
both the How to Heal Our Divides website and also point to it from the book. But
Yeah.
is that the best way for people to kind of learn about this?
Yes. If a church asks me to come in and teach, I can teach the whole model. In fact, I need to do an expanded seminar on this thing now. And, but the ebook is 60 pages. It was designed to be kind of a teaser for the upcoming larger book, but people are taking that ebook and using it all over the world. There are people writing me, hey, I'm a Muslim. This is working in my village. And I mean, they're getting enough out of, to explain how to host, what is halal. It explains. It's just a very simple guide. And then I have people say, hey, I've read your ebook. Will you mentor me? You know what I mean? Can I call you? Can I? And I have, and now that I have a kind of a global online ministry, I'll still practice this. Say, how can I be a blessing? I have people, will you help Muslims? Will you help me with my YouTube channel? How do you do that? And so I'm still practicing that during COVID. But yeah, the ebook, it's a simple book. And so I really thank Mikal Muhlenberg for that. She took my larger book and boiled it down to 60 pages. And people have responded well to it. Yeah, they've responded well to it. And it'll help them get started. And that might be all they need if they read the research, do what I say in the book. But if they want more mentoring or help, what I'm saying, they can contact me. And eventually I'm going to have a full-blown expanded seminar. I'm probably going to do that after I write the book, finish the book and then create that sort. Yeah.
Well, we'll have links to all of that, on our website when it's available. So.
Great. Yeah. But that ebook I'm stunned how people, and one thing about people, sometimes they just need a little knowledge and a little understanding. And a lot of people are self-starters. They'll just, guys, this is the right thing to do. I'm going to go do it. And I've been shocked. And the same principles of that book would apply to racial reconciliation.
Sure.
Other people have said, oh my gosh, we got people in our church who are divided on gun control issues. We think this would be a good model to have it co-led by we have our communities of reconciliation co-led by Muslims and Christians. And they take a 1-year journey together, and that I created that document with the help of Jim Till before I even wrote the ebook. We were doing this communities of reconciliation, and that's a core to the whole problem, to the whole book there. And one minister said, I could have a pro-gun person and an anti-gun person co-lead a group, and we could follow these principles to reach a third alternative on this. And so, yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's good to hear, that it's being widely applied.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for all the work that you've done and for participating in this project. And, I'm really anxious to see where your work continues to grow. So good luck with that. Many blessings with that. And thank you so much for contributing to our little project.
Yes, I'm honored.